Marvel fans all over the world are anxiously awaiting the sequel to 2017's blockbuster Spider-Man: Homecoming. Now that the amazing wall crawler is part of the MCU and an Avenger to boot, we saw our hero disintegrated by Thanos' fingersnap of doom at the end of Infinity War. This leaves fans wondering exactly where the sequel, Spider-Man: Far From Home, falls in continuity. There's been an interesting new theory on that, and we think you should know about it. With the debut of the most recent trailers for Spider-Man: Far From Home, fans were assured that they were in for a wild ride, and a lot of what we're used to as far as Spider-Man movies go. Some slam-bang action, a couple of villains from Spider-Man's comic book history, in this case Jake Gyllenhaal as creepy fishbowl head Mysterio, and a supporting cast second to none. But this left a lot of fans wondering how Spider-Man could be in a movie after we watched the wall crawler disintegrate in Tony Stark's arms at the end of Infinity War. That's a good question, but fans are taking it a step further, and based on evidence in the trailers we've seen, a lot of fans think Spider-Man never actually got off the bus at the beginning of Infinity War because after revisions to the time stream that we're probably going to see in Avengers Endgame, all the havoc that big purple jerk Thanos brought about with his glovey finger snap likely never happened. By the way, have you ever tried to snap your fingers while wearing gloves? It's not easy. We've tried with the wool gloves that our moms knitted for us, and we've tried with those leather gloves you get at the drugstore. No dice. Yeah, Thanos is super strong, but we're not so sure he could get an audible snap out of his yellow gloved fingers, but that's besides the point. Anyway, historically, Marvel movies have done a great job capturing the magic that Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Jack Kirby and the rest of the team created back in 1961 by building a continuing story and an ever-expanding universe. And in the MCU, the stories in each movie have built that universe piece by piece. Each movie was, more or less, a continuation or a parallel story to the movies that came before it. Time in the MCU has always moved forward. There hasn't been a single movie that's ever taken place before the movies that came before it. Yes, we know Captain America had that whole World War II part, but the movie ended in the contemporary universe so that Cap could fit into the already existing timeline. And we'll probably see the same thing with Captain Marvel. This allows the most casual moviegoer to enjoy any Marvel movie as a standalone experience. While it helps to know who, say, Hawkeye is before the movie, the writers do a pretty good job catching everybody up. But Redditor IC Canada seems to think that we're about to experience a pretty serious retcon, and that Spider-Man never got off the bus to fight Thanos because the Infinity War never actually happened. The theory reads like this. Far From Home is set right after the events of Endgame, but what if there is an unsnap in Endgame? One that doesn't just see everyone undusted, but that, through the use of the Infinity Stones themselves, resets the world to a point where Thanos never attacked Earth at all, erasing the attack, decimation, and everyone's memories of it. This explains why Peter had the original Stark suit in the Far From Home trailer as opposed to the Iron Spider suit. Thanos' attack never happened, so Peter never got off the bus on his way back from the field trip to the Museum of Modern Art. As such, he never got the Iron Spider suit. This also adds a nice bit of foreshadowing to Thanos telling Tony, "I hope they remember you." Even more so if it's Tony's sacrifice that makes the unsnap possible. Not to mention, a relationship with Happy and Aunt May only happens in a world where Tony isn't around. It introduces one of those classic time travel tropes to Endgame. If you're successful, the only one who will remember any of this is you. There's a few cool little hints in the Far From Home trailer, and some more evidence in the MCU films preceding it that give this theory a little credibility. First of all, we're shown that Peter doesn't want to take his Spider-Man suit to Europe. That doesn't sound like Mr. "with great power comes great responsibility" to us. But what if the spider suit is a reminder of his pal and mentor Tony Stark, who seems to be filling in for Uncle Ben as a moral compass for young Peter? You see, many fans believe Tony Stark dies at the end of Endgame, and they think the cryptic comment by Thanos, that whole "I hope they remember you," is Shakespeare-level foreshadowing the untimely death of the invincible Iron Man. One of the other things we know about Far From Home is the romance between Aunt May and Happy Hogan. Now, we've seen Tony Stark's obvious flirtations with Aunt May in her previous appearances in the MCU, but that doesn't amount to much because Tony flirts with everyone. But consider this. If Happy Hogan is romancing Aunt May in Far From Home, do you think he's able to do that with a handsome bazillionaire superhero who has an electric heart there to block your every move? Yes, he's devoted to Pepper Potts, and Tony Stark is many things, but he's not a wingman. Don't believe us? Why don't you ask War Machine, who's literally Iron Man's wingman? Maybe Tony survives and marries Pepper Potts and has that baby he kept talking about, which would conveniently open the door for Happy Hogan, but we don't see anything to support this one way or the other. Now, it's pretty clear that time travel will be a big part of Avengers Endgame. Theories are all over the place, stating that the Avengers will travel through the past and pluck the Infinity Stones from various points in time to assemble an alternate Infinity Gauntlet. Finally, there's gonna be one for each hand, and also find a way to prevent Thanos from getting his hands on the stones in the first place. Set photos from Endgame that show our heroes in earlier versions of their costumes certainly indicate that we'll be revisiting some old scenes, and we're certain that Thanos' half-off fingersnap sale will be undone by the end of the movie. But the questions remain. What's the fallout from undoing history, and at what point are things rebooted? If the Avengers prevent Thanos from collecting the Infinity Stones and therefore prevent him from finger-snapping away half of everything, it's also entirely possible that Thanos' invasion of New York never happened. That non-aerodynamic spaceship with all of its circuitry exposed never hovered over the East River, and if that danger was removed, then it didn't trigger Peter's arm-hair-tingling spider sense, and consequently, there'd be no reason for him to get off the bus in the first place. If Peter never got off the bus and never fought Thanos, then he never received the iron spider armor that he used to fight Thanos in space. This could explain why Peter's seen in the original Homecoming Spider-Man suit instead of the ultra super techie Iron Spider suit. Plus, we think the original suit looks cooler, but that's just our opinion. So this leaves the door open for Spider-Man Far From Home to happen without ever even acknowledging Infinity War, Thanos, the Infinity Gauntlet, and the fact that Peter was dead or disintegrated or whatever happened to him. It also allows for Happy Hogan to start macking on every fanboy's favorite cougar, Aunt May. Historically, Spider-Man's no stranger to retroactive continuity or time travel. He's been married to Mary Jane, unmarried to Mary Jane, and has had friends come back from the dead. Heck, even in one story, a work colleague of Peter's manages to construct the break room of tomorrow. You walk in and are transported 24 hours into the future. For example, when Pete's pal Grady demonstrates it to Peter, he emerges with the next day's copy of the Daily Bugle. When Peter gives it a try, the instant he steps foot in the room, everything changes. New York City has been destroyed, countless lives have been lost, and all of this is because Peter traveled 24 hours into the future. Because, say it with us, with great power comes great responsibility, and all of Manhattan goes to you-know-where in a handbasket if the amazing Spider-Man isn't out there punching bank robbers and lab coat-wearing lizards. No wonder he's depressed. That's a lot of responsibility. There was even this weird story in 2003 where it was revealed that May Parker may have actually been Peter's real mom, and that the whole story about Peter's parents being Richard and Mary Parker and being killed by Red Skull was a cover for May's scandalous pregnancy. This story was so unpopular with fans that Marvel editors have all but come right out and said that it's not canon, even though it was only published 15 or 16 years ago. Spider-Man's origin story is a classic. While a ton of comic stories have played around with the legendary radioactive spider bite by making the spider genetically modified or juiced with some kind of super serum, no retcon was as weird as the 2005 story Spider-Man: The Other. As a part of his run on the Amazing Spider-Man monthly comic, J. Michael Straczynski took the web-slinger into a totally crazy new direction. In a retcon that absolutely nobody asked for, the source of Spider-Man's powers were revealed not to be from the radioactivity of the spider, but the spider itself. This change made Spider-Man the avatar of a totemic spider god. Yeah, really. And this is when stuff got weird. After seemingly dying at the hands of a magical spider vampire, yeah, you heard that right, we said spider vampire, old Peter Parker developed crazy new powers, including super cool spider fangs, a super healing factor, organic web shooters, and a pair of retractable stingers for stabbing people. You know, like a Wolverine, we mean spider. And of course, all of this was after he came back from the dead by recreating his body inside a giant cocoon. For some reason, this retcon con wasn't a giant hit with fans. Oh, and don't even get us started on the whole clone saga baloney. It's been almost 30 years since that story, and we're still not happy about it. Anyone who saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and if you didn't go see it right after you watched this video, knows that there are many variations of the Spider-Man story, and almost anything goes when it comes to telling a Spider-Man story. But Spider-Man Far From Home isn't just a Spider-Man story, it's a Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man story. This means it affects and is affected by events in the other MCU movies. And if the fingersnap of doom is undone, it means that Thanos never invaded Earth, and therefore, there was no reason for Spider-Man to get off the bus. That's why Spider-Man's wearing his original Spidey suit in all the Far From Home action scenes. We think the Happy Hogan thing is a bit of a stretch, but we'll go with it because we think the idea of Happy and Aunt May together could be fun. Here's what we think is going on. When Doctor Strange and Wong are fighting Thanos' crew in the middle of Greenwich Village, and old No-Nose can't get the stone out of the eye of Agamotto because Strange is using a simple spell that can't be easily broken, it's a marker in time for the ultimate reset of the fingersnap of doom. Doctor Strange cast the spell as soon as Ma landed on Earth, and it's at that moment where the movie cuts to Spider-Man, Flash, Stan Lee, and the rest of the gang on the bus. If the universe is reset to that point, it's nothing but logical to conclude that Spider-Man stayed on the bus, and that Far From Home takes place at the same time as Ma's landing, but undone and therefore not landing in Manhattan. From a storytelling standpoint, using the scene where we saw Pete's arm hair Spidey sense on the bus as both his introduction to Infinity War and the starting point for Far From Home would be a pretty clever and unexpected treat from the Marvel team. Keeping track of what happened to who, when it happened, and if it happened first but didn't happen can be frustrating. Fortunately, we have a feeling that by the final frames of Avengers Endgame, all of this will be neatly wrapped up so we can quit worrying about it and enjoy the next chapter in the MCU Spider-Man franchise. We can't wait. Save us some popcorn. It's gonna be good. And that's why we think Peter Parker never got off the bus. Do you think Spider-Man Far From Home actually takes place before Infinity War? Is there anything that we may have missed? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU content. Thanks for watching.